Hi, everybody, and welcome to Sports Legends of the Carolinas. I'm your host, Scott Fowler, sports columnist for the Charlotte Observer, where I've worked since 1994. And after doing this for nearly 30 years, a lot of times I get the question, who are the people you've most enjoyed covering? This podcast answers that question, letting you get to know some of Carolina's sports legends the way I've gotten to know them, beyond the headlines and off the field.
What a finish at Daytona. Dale Jr. on top of the car.
For this episode, I'm sitting down with NASCAR legend Dale Earnhardt Jr. You probably know him as a third-generation driver, a TV broadcaster, a car owner, and as of just a few months ago, a member of the NASCAR Hall of Fame. He's also a husband, a father to two beautiful girls, the son of Dale Earnhardt Sr., and the person I'll always be grateful to for recommending way back in the early 2000s that I start watching a little-known TV show called The Office. In this episode, Dale Jr. talks about life with and without his legendary father, as well as becoming a dad and why he'd like to go back and slap his younger self. That's a side of Dale Earnhardt Jr. you'll only get here on Sports Legends of the Carolinas.
So old stuff would pile up in the storage unit. We're throwing all kinds of stuff in the back of this dump truck. And so a buddy's down there, and he grabs his trash bag, he looks in there, he's like, there's a uniform in here. You mean to throw this away? And I have a bunch of pictures of Dad. I immediately grab my phone, and I'm like, his very first win in 1979 at Bristol. And it's the uniform.
Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review this podcast wherever you're listening. And to continue supporting content like this, please consider a digital subscription to the Charlotte Observer. Dale Jr., welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Let's start with this, Dale. In January, you were inducted into the NASCAR Hall of Fame, and you called that at the time the greatest honor of my career when we spoke the day before your induction. So you've done so many things in your life. I just wonder why that one was so significant to you.
I think that getting into the Hall of Fame is like the last big box you want to check or hope that you could check. It's also like a big affirmation moment, and I think the Hall of Fame might mean different things to different people, particularly like athletes that are going into the Hall of Fame for whatever sport they played. It signified that I mattered, and I feel like I'm in constant need of sort of this affirmation about it throughout my life, in every day of my life. I need somebody to say, that was a good choice, or you did a good job there. So that was, I worked my whole career to have someone at the end of the day say, you were great to have around. We're glad you were here. We're glad that you were a part of this. And that's kind of what that Hall of Fame induction does. It makes you feel appreciated. So I know I'm not the greatest race car driver that ever raced. I didn't get to be that. I didn't get to be the one with the most accolades or best stat sheet or most accomplishments. But I wanted to matter, and I wanted to succeed and be good. And I think that, people say when you win the Daytona 500 or anything, a championship or whatever, they say, well, they can't take this away from you. Nobody can deny you. And it's only been a few months, and it's really weird to be introduced as a Hall of Famer. It's a strange feeling when somebody says that. You're
young for a Hall of Famer too. I mean, a lot of people, that comes when they're 75 or something. And
I agree. I've always loved the history of the sport, and looking at the names on the induction list, I see a lot of names that belong in there, and I always felt like I was happy to wait my turn, and that's maybe the only thing about it that feels a bit unfortunate, I guess, is that I did get put into the Hall of Fame before Larry Phillips, who I know would have drove circles around me. Sam Ard, right? Some of the other names. I mean, every name. You look at that. You look at every time the ballot comes up, and everybody that's mentioned is a Hall of Famer. They are. And just will they get chose this time around? And so it's going to be fun, I guess, going forward, trying to influence who goes in, and if you have any influence, that voting process will matter more to me now than it ever did. I was a historian and loved to debate and get excited about who was chosen. It'll matter more now than ever because of being a member.
I know you feel so strongly about NASCAR history, and that it's cool. I think you've written before that sometimes you're the guy who is engaged in a late night bidding war on eBay for some random piece of merchandise. What are some of the things you have in your possession or in your collection that matter the most to you?
I've been lucky to come across a couple autograph books that were accumulated by an individual that I don't know. So there's these. I got two of them where it's just a small old notebook that has autographs in it from drivers of many different disciplines, but from the 50s and the 60s and the 70s. I've got an autograph book with probably 80 names in it, and one of them's Ralph Earnhardt's.
Well, a possible winner is Ralph Earnhardt. Ralph, it looks as though they found something wrong with Yarborough's car. Is that right? Well, they found an illegal wheel on it.
See, history being made today. The first ever third-generation driver to become a NASCAR Series champion.
To me, being able to possess an autograph of an individual who's deceased, who can no longer provide you with such a unique piece of merchandise, is something that I think is really cool. So those are a couple items that I like. Dad's uniforms. I'll tell you a cool story. I get a lot of stuff handed to me over the years, and especially back in the mid-2000s during the peak of our popularity. Mm-hmm. Everywhere we went, somebody was handing you something, right, and saying, you might want this, or you might need to hang on to this. It might be a picture that you've seen 1,000 times, that you've signed 1,000 times. It might be something so insignificant. Most of the items are something that you either already have, right, or it's a die cast of your dad's or something that you've got multiples of. But this person believes in their heart that this is something that will mean something to you, and so you get all these things accumulating, all these things. And I had a storage unit on my property, not a typical storage unit you see on the side of the road, but I had like this storage building, and I would just, when I would get things given to me, handed to me, sent to me, mailed to me, a lot of those things might end up in this storage unit. Along with all of my junk, I'm big into computer gaming, and so everything from 6 months ago is obsolete, and you're always upgrading, and monitors and hardware and all that stuff, and so old stuff would pile up in this storage unit. One day I decided with a few friends to clean this thing out. So I'm cleaning out this storage unit, and we're throwing all kinds of stuff in the back of this dump truck. And the storage unit's on the second floor, and the dump truck's backed up to 2 double doors downstairs. So we're just throwing stuff off into this dump truck from above. And I grabbed this black trash bag, and I just threw it. Didn't think anything about it. A buddy of mine's, the stuff's piling up and starting to slide off the side of the dump truck. And so a buddy's down there straightening up our mess. And he grabs his trash bag, he looks in there, he's like, there's a uniform in here. You mean to throw this away? I was like, a uniform? What kind of uniform is in there? I'm thinking, what uniform of mine have I tossed away? He pulled it out, and it was a yellow uniform with blue stripes, had old patches. So I immediately recognized it. It was one of Dad's uniforms from either 1979 or 80.
Wow.
And I have a bunch of pictures of Dad from that year, or those 2 years, his rookie year and his first Cup championship in the NASCAR series. So I immediately grabbed my phone, and I'm like, I looked at his his very first win in 1979 at Bristol. And it's the uniform.
Whoa, really? Huh. Was that Wrangler or was that
Nope.
what was blue and yellow?
He was he didn't have a sponsor. It was Australian car, and Mike Kerb ended up coming along and getting on the side of the car at one point. But this was like the 5th, 6th race of the year at Bristol, his rookie year. No sponsor on the car. And it was just it was a yellow uniform, blue stripes, and the patches all are where they're supposed to be. He had 2 or 3 uniforms that year, and the patches were all in different places. So it's like obvious, like which uniform was which. And so it's funny because this was his uniform that he won his first race in. And in the off season, he wore that uniform in 1979 and in 1980. He wore the same uniform. He had 2 or 3, and he wore them both years. After 1980, he's going to get new uniforms, and he does. So on the new uniforms in 1980, they had this blue sort of V Western style pattern that came down off the shoulder. And on this Rookie of the Year 1979-1980 uniform, they drew with ink pen some of the ideas of how they might change the uniform for the next year. And so there's some ink pen marks on the shoulders.
Oh my gosh! Wow!
Of how eventually they made the uniform. So somebody has that thing, and they're like, you know what we ought to do is maybe make this blue right here, and so that's sort of, you can barely see where they were sort of drafting on this uniform.
Yeah.
And I don't know why Dad didn't have it, why it's not somewhere where his possessions are. I don't know what route it took to get to me. I have no idea. I do not remember anybody giving it to me or how it ended up in that storage unit. But that is absolutely one of my favorite pieces, because of all of the things that had to happen for it to find its way back to me that I don't even know.
Yeah. What a great, beautiful mystery.
Yes.
How that actually happened. We'll be back right after this. Welcome back.
Look at Dale Earnhardt Jr. and his dad right behind him following in his tire tracks.
That's got to be quite an experience for Dad to be watching his kid up in front.
Remember that Daytona afternoon? And he just walked in and gave him a hug and immediately got out of victory lane. It was not Earnhardt Sr.'s victory lane, and he wasn't going to be part of Dale Earnhardt Jr.'s party. He just wanted to support him.
You mentioned your dad, and I know you said he would say he was proud of me, but he would also say some other things. And I think one thing that you mentioned at that time was he would say, well, you didn't quite fulfill your potential as a driver, and I agree. And can you sort of explain that a little bit?
Yeah. I didn't realize the work ethic needed to be as great as I could possibly be. And so I got partnered up with Budweiser, which had Dad lived, he would have probably encouraged me successfully to be better at applying myself. But when he passed away, there were a lot of emotions that came with that. One of the emotions, which was uncontrollable, I felt guilty about it, but it was uncontrollable. I didn't get to choose how I felt. When something like that happens in your life, you don't choose the emotions you're having. They're happening. And I had all the traditional ones that you might imagine. Terrible sadness and just dark depression. But I had this odd, strange feeling of being freed from some limitation or some sort of mental binding. It was scary because now I was able to make my own choices in my life, but Dad was always a ceiling to protect me. He was this sort of protective
a wall
ozone
sort of
layer. Yeah, and that was gone. And now I had this feeling of some sort of freedom that was very dangerous. and scary. Like, where's my leader? Where's my leadership? My leadership's gone.
You're about 26 years old, I think, when he passed away. Mm-hmm.
And so that was not much of it wasn't a blessing. And it was really scary.
Very happy, Tony Erie. Tony, what do you guys got in that race car that nobody else has?
I think the biggest deal is between the seat and steering wheel, really.
Tony Sr., Tony Jr. were great motivating forces in my life, Tony Sr. especially at that time.
Dale Sr., he came to me and wanted to know, he said, you think you can make a race car driver out of Dale Jr.? And he said, well, if you think you can make a race car driver out of him, I'm going to put him in the Busch car. So, that was our goal. We took Dale Jr. to the racetrack and letting him learn how to drive, and taking Tony Jr. to the racetrack and letting him learn to be a crew chief.
But he wasn't my dad, and he wasn't going to be there every day. He wasn't going to be calling me at 9 o'clock saying, where are you at? He wasn't going to be going, calling me at 9 in the morning saying, are you up yet? But when he was around, or I was around him, by God, you were going to go by his rules. He was the man in charge. But the other times in the day when I was free to do whatever it is I wanted to do, I was doing it. I was doing whatever I wanted to do. I wasn't focusing on becoming a better race car driver. I wasn't going to the shop and asking, how can we be faster? Or how can we do better? And so, the worst examples of me basically not mailing it in, but trying to get away with the minimum effort was around 2005 or 4, 2006, walking into the garage when practice is starting. So I'd be in the bus playing video games and literally looking at my watch going 10 minutes to practice. I can play a few more minutes. 5 minutes to practice. I can play a few more minutes. And then 2 minutes to practice and running into the garage. And guys are in their cars, strapped in, cranking them up, pulling out of the garage to go out on pit road and line up and wait for the track to be green. And I'm walking up to the car with my uniform tied around my waist, like, hey, I'm here. And contrast that with when I went to work with Letarte and he said, you're going to be at the truck an hour before practice starts or 30 minutes before practice starts every week. No questions. This isn't debatable. It's not negotiable. That's when you're going to be here. And I was. And so when I went to Hendrick, I learned, I didn't have this, when I went to Hendrick, I didn't have like a burst of success or things turned around, but I did learn over time, like, wow, this is how you prepare. I was not trying this hard. When I went to Hendrick, we tried hard to fix it. We tried hard to get back to victory lane. Eventually, during the years with Steve and even, before that with Lance and then with Greg Ives, the effort that I was putting in during that period of time in my career was way more than what I was doing when I drove the Red 8.
And you still won something.
I know.
I guess it's the talent and the car.
Well,
you could get away with this.
I could get away with it being young, and we had great cars. And I think that there aren't but a couple people, I'm sure, that are going to get to the end of their career and look back and not think, man, I could have done so many things better or different or tried this or that. And I'm just honest about it. I feel like I did do some great things. I did more than I expected to do in terms of success and winning. But, yeah, when I got to the end of it, after learning what I learned by going to Hendrick and understanding what the winning ways were and the Hendrick way, I thought, dang, I wonder, man, how many more races I might have won had I really been
locked in,
eat, sleep, drink, racing. Now, it wouldn't have been as fun, but
right.
I would have probably won anywhere between 25 to 75% more races, maybe.
Oh, geez. So instead of 26, you think you could have?
Maybe 35, 40 races.
Okay.
For sure. We had the cars and the ability to go out there and make that happen. And, I got we had 6 wins in 2004, great season, and went to Homestead. We had something happen a couple weeks before that cost us some points, and boy, we were pissed. We were all hot, and upset. And maybe I think Tony Sr. and Tony Jr. were a little annoyed with me. We all saw this like great season and this real opportunity. I think they saw the opportunity to win the championship clearer than I did. I saw, man, I had a great year. Yeah. What's the big, and they're like, no, we should have won the championship. And damn it, you got to understand where you could have applied yourself a little better and maybe made a bit of a difference. But anyways, we were kind of all annoyed with what was happening to us and also each other. And at Homestead, me and Tony Jr. were in the middle of practice and just quit talking to each other. we just agreed. We just both were so annoyed that the car wasn't handling that great and driving that good. And it was like we both just give each other the cold shoulder. And I left Homestead thinking I needed a change. If I could talk to that version of myself, I would slap the shit out of me. I would. I'm so angry with that decision and being how I influenced that choice to split from Tony Sr. And that was a bad choice. And I thought in my mind that I was going to be better off with someone else. That, man, I bet you somebody else can give me better cars. And boy, I was wrong. And it's that decision had an effect on Tony Jr. and Tony Sr.'s lives going forward for years. And my life, my career.
You split with him right after 04 season?
04, yeah.
The end of February or 1st of March. It was a long time before he ever made it. He came to me and told me he was not going to re-sign. And
so Tony Jr. goes to Tony Sr. is no longer a crew chief. He goes into sort of some more kind of a manager style role, but Tony Jr. is now Michael's crew chief. I had a couple of different people crew chief in my car that year. It didn't really work out.
And time has run out on Tony Eury Jr.'s attempts to get his driver to victory lane and into chase contention. Eury Jr. is out as Dale Earnhardt Jr.'s crew chief.
And we get to Talladega in the back half of the year, and I went over to Tony Jr. and I said, what do you say we get back together, man? This is not working for me. And he goes, yeah, I'm good with it. I was like, thank God. I was like, I don't know what the hell I was thinking. And let's get through the rest of this year and let's figure this out. I'll just come back to your car. And he's like, got it, no problem. So that's what we did.
Well, you figured it out. It just took a while, I guess, right? Yeah.
We can go on. We can go on and on down this rabbit hole.
Thanks so much for listening to Sports Legends of the Carolinas. You've just heard the first half of our conversation, but there's much more to come.
I think that's going to be one of my frustrations in my life going forward, is trying to convince them of who I used to be. I don't think I'll ever be able to get it through their heads what 2004 was like for me, and they'll probably never think that was as big a deal as I do.
I dedicate this win to him. I mean, there ain't nobody else that I can dedicate it to.
For that, please purchase a premium subscription to our show, exclusively on Apple Podcasts. And for video of these interviews, visit charlotteobserver.com/sportslegends.
Here comes Dale Earnhardt Jr. He wins at Daytona.
I'm Scott Fowler, and this is Sports Legends of the Carolinas. This show is produced by Jeff Seiner and Cotta Stevens, and the director of audio at McClatchy is Davin Coburn. For lots more content and to continue supporting this kind of work, please visit charlotteobserver.com/sportslegends and consider a digital subscription. Connect with me on Twitter at Scott_Fowler or by email at sfowler@charlotteobserver.com. And don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you like what you hear, please share with a friend. See you next week.